Welcome everybody. It looks like it's just after 5:30. We're just going to give everybody a couple more minutes and then we will go ahead and get started.
Sounds good.
Evening teammates.
Is the entire community invited tonight, Christine?
Yes, we've announced it in our weekly 411. We've done a special e-blast and we do record these and we'll make the video from this shareable and we'll put it out there. We do know that tonight is the last of the presidential debates. It starts at 6:30, so I'm recording it. As soon as this is over, I will go get caught up. So yeah.
How dare they do that to Morgan Hill?
Right, right.
Contact the networks about that, don't we?
That's right.
But no World Series game tonight, John. So
yeah.
No, tomorrow night.
Yeah, they postponed the World Series for our town hall.
Appreciate that. Very serious. What are you saying? We're even.
All right. Well, I want to just do a welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for our town hall. We've been doing town halls about twice a month. In November, December, we'll do it once a month. Tonight, our primary focus is to talk about the local measures. And so we have our partners here from Valley Water, from Open Space Authority, as well as from Caltrain. Now, before we do that, I just wanted to give a super brief update on a couple things. One is the census, and as everybody knows, it came to an end on October the 15th. Santa Clara County reached a 77.7% for the census, and that is up from 74% from 2010. And our response rate in Morgan Hill was 81.9%, and that's up from 75.3%. We had the 5th highest response rate in the county. We received a grant and put resources towards the census and some of the harder to count areas. And so we're very pleased with the results. The other item I wanted to just mention is the elections and a couple things. Everyone is receiving a vote by mail ballot. You should have received it. You can check the status if you haven't at where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov. We have all sorts of resources on our website about where you can vote. So check that out. And then the tool called Voters Edge, that's votersedge.org/CA. You can look at your entire ballot and you can look at the measures, the candidates, who supports them, and keep track of your choices and save them for election day. And so let's talk a little bit about the format for tonight. As I mentioned, we have our 3 partners with us. And so each of them are, we're gonna go in order. We have first Valley Water, Open Space Authority, and then Caltrain. And they are going to introduce the measures that are on the ballot. And it's about 5 minutes of presentation, and then we'll open it up to the community for any sort of questions. And then at the end, we'll do a final Q&A, and then we'll do closing remarks. The nexus of this particular town hall was Mayor Pro Tem Yvonne Martinez Beltran wanted the opportunity for our community to hear about the different measures. And so we talked about different venues, and we thought the town hall would be a great option. We typically have a good number of attendees, and then we record it, make it available. So we decided to do it as a town hall. And so I want to thank each of you for joining us tonight. And with that, I want to just jump right over to Valley Water. I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to let you introduce who you have here tonight, and then we'll either help play the video or PowerPoint where you can share your screen. And so with that, shall I turn it over to you, Rachel?
Actually, yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Director John L. Varela. I think a Morgan Hill local, well-known figure in your community. He's been here for a very long time. We're pleased to have him on our board of directors as the representative for District 1. So with that, I'll turn things over to Director Varela to kick things off.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Christina. And good evening. Thank you all for inviting me and Valley Water to be here with you today. As the representative of South County, I appreciate the opportunity to present on Measure S, Valley Water's proposed renewal of the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program. After my remarks, Rachel Gibson, who is Chief of External Affairs, will offer further comments, and then we can take any questions you may have. Before we begin, I would like to ask Valley Water staff, actually Angie Gonzalez, Morgan Hill staff, will play a short video on our Safe Clean Water program. Ms. Gonzalez?
What is the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program? The Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program was overwhelmingly approved by 74% of Santa Clara County voters in 2012. The program identified 5 priorities developed in collaboration with thousands of residents and stakeholders. Priority A, a safe, reliable water supply. Building sustainable, locally controlled water supply projects that are resilient to emergencies, disasters, and droughts. Priority B, reduce toxins and contaminants in our waterways. Providing a safe and clean supply of water, ensuring our waterways are protected from toxins, contaminants, and pollution. Priority C, protect our water supply from earthquakes and natural disasters. Protecting our water supply, water quality, dams and flood protection channels from public emergencies, earthquakes, natural disasters, and climate change. Priority D, restore habitat and provide open space. Protecting our natural areas by working to restore habitats along creeks and the bay. Priority E, provide flood protection. Funding projects that protect our homes, schools, and businesses from the threat of floods. The program helps us care for waterways and provide flood protection to homes, schools, and businesses. As we contend with public emergencies, natural disasters, population growth, and uncertain future water supplies, we are exploring how to replace and renew the existing program to address these challenges.
Thank you, Angie, for putting that together and for sharing that video. On July 21st of 2020, my fellow Valley Water board members and I voted unanimously to place a renewal measure of the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program in front of the voters this November 3rd for their consideration. As the video mentioned, in November 2012, 74% of Valley Water voters approved the original Safe Clean Water Program as a countywide special parcel tax to provide local funding for local projects that deliver safe, clean water, natural flood protection, and environmental stewardship to the communities we serve in Santa Clara County. While evaluating ways to improve the 2012 program, Valley Water gathered feedback from more than 21,000 community members through an extensive community engagement process. From that extensive outreach, we developed the 6 priorities outlined in the video. But tonight, I wanted to highlight a few of importance specifically to Morgan Hill. First, the renewed program would fund upgrades to pipelines, dams, and water infrastructure to improve water supplies and prepare for the risk of flooding, droughts, earthquakes, natural disasters, and climate change. This renewal continues funding for the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project, which is Valley Water's top priority. We also included $46.3 million for the Yagas Creek Flood Protection Project. That is a flood protection and environmental stewardship project for residents in South County. The updated program will also reduce toxins, hazards, and contaminants in our rivers, lakes, and streams through pollution prevention and creek cleanup efforts, including the availability of $38.7 million to continue the ongoing coordination with local cities, local service agencies to help clean up large creekside encampments. You can find out more about the proposed program renewal, including downloading a copy of the program at safecleanwater.org. With that, I'd like to turn to Rachel Gibson to make a few comments. Rachel?
Thank you so much, Director Varela. And I just wanted to state again for the record, my name is Rachel Gibson, and I'm actually not here in my official capacity as with Valley Water. I'm here as a volunteer with the Yes on Measure S campaign. As Director Varela mentioned, factually, we have a number of different pots of funding within the proposed Measure S that would benefit Morgan Hill. And I would like to explain to you why you should vote yes on Measure S when you see it either on your mail-in ballot or when you go to the polls on November 3rd, which is just right around the corner. First and foremost, Director Varela mentioned that we did extensive surveys of the community, 21,000 touches to the community, to say, if we were to renew a program, what would you like to see? And their top 3 priorities were actually priorities that would benefit Morgan Hill as well. Number 1, they want Anderson Dam fixed. Number 2, they wanted to make sure that our water supplies are safe and clean and secure. Number 3, they really want the homeless encampment problem dealt with, because I think everybody can agree it's just exploded all over the county, including here in Morgan Hill, since the COVID-19 pandemic took hold. So first, let me just talk a little bit about Anderson Dam. Obviously, it is Valley Water's highest priority to fix that dam. No one, I think, appreciates that more than the residents and businesses in Morgan Hill. You guys are right in its shadow. Everyone understands the importance of getting the dam completely rebuilt so that it is safe, secure, and so that it can store as much water as it was intended to do right from the very beginning. So that's number 1. Number 2, and Director Varela mentioned this as well, the Yaugus Creek Flood Protection Project. Morgan Hill has patiently waited for its turn to get the same flood protection afforded to other cities around Santa Clara County, and Measure S would provide desperately needed funding to help carry Yaugus to the finish line. We've made significant progress. In fact, Director Varela just mentioned a couple of days ago that we're actually ahead of schedule just because of the labor availability on Yaugus. So Measure S would help us complete that and get Yaugus right to that finish line right away. Sorry, my family's in the background. We're keeping it real apparently tonight. Thirdly, homeless encampments. As I mentioned, they've exploded all over the county, and the community is just really for this problem to be dealt with. And we understand that as well. You know, they often encamp along our riverways and streams. They're out of sight and sometimes out of mind. It is a tragic, and honestly, one of the biggest societal problems that I think every city is dealing with. Measure S would allocate more funding to help remedy that problem, and so that Valley Water can be part of a solution with our partner cities. Some folks have also asked, why now? You know, why renew the program now? Honestly, the best analogy we can give is that of a broken car. We have a program that we know could use some fixing. You wouldn't wait 7 years to fix a car where you know the brakes had gone out. It's the same thing with this program, and the homeless encampment issue is one that really exemplifies it. We allocated funding in the existing program that we thought would last 15 years for the homeless encampment problem. It was gone in the first 5 because the scope and magnitude of the problem was so much bigger than anybody else could have ever imagined. So Measure S helps to remedy that problem. Also, some have asked, well, you know, why is it long term? Really, and Yaugus is a good example of this. You know, these flood protection projects are always going to be needed, especially in the face of climate change. And when we build a flood protection project, you don't just build it and walk away. These flood protection projects need ongoing maintenance. You got to make sure stuff doesn't grow up in the middle of the channel and clog it up, and then all of a sudden people are thrust back into the floodplain, which is happening in the north part of San Jose as we speak. So that's one of the main reasons why long term. Also, just thinking about it long term, you know, this Measure S is not just for this generation, it's for future generations. It really represents the future safe, clean water supplies, flood protection, and environmental stewardship for this valley, not just for us who are sitting here today, but we bear a responsibility to take care of this environment and these problems for our children as well. So I'll just end with a couple of final notes. Measure S does include another senior exemption, as the current program does. And of course, it would generate a whole ton of jobs, 40,000 we're estimating, with all the different projects that are included in it. This is good, especially right now when we sure could use some economic stimulus. So please join me. I hope you'll join me and join all of my colleagues in voting yes on Measure S, November 3rd. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Director Varela. Now what we'd like to do is open it up for any comments or questions for Valley Water. So if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and raise your virtual hand. If you're calling in, you can dial *9. We also have a Q&A feature, and we have a chat feature. And I'll just wait another moment. And then next up, we're going to have the Open Space Authority. And
Christine,
then,
can I have just a quick second?
absolutely.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank Councilmember Yvonne Martinez Beltran for organizing tonight's event in this program. I really appreciate her invitation and putting this together. So thank you, Councilmember Beltran.
Thank you. All right, we'll not see any questions right now. We'll have time at the end as well. I do want to now turn it over to the Open Space Authority. And so, Andrea, if you want to get started and then introduce yourself and anyone else that is with you.
Thank you, Christina. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Terrific. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work out pretty well. I don't know why it's not going to slideshow. There we go. Well, good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to make a presentation on Measure T. I'm Andrea McKenzie, General Manager of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. As many of you know, the Open Space Authority is a special district created in 1993 through the actions of local citizens and the state legislature to provide a balance to growth in the Silicon Valley by protecting and restoring open space, natural areas, water resources, agricultural lands, and providing nature-based outdoor recreation. The authority has protected 28,000 acres to date and operates a system of open space preserves open 365 days a year free of charge. Our jurisdiction covers 1,000 square miles of the county and includes the cities of San Jose, Milpitas, Santa Clara, Campbell, Morgan Hill, and unincorporated territory. The authority is funded through voter-approved funding measures and grants, and its annual revenue is approximately $12 million. On July 23rd, the Authority Board of Directors voted to place Measure T on the November 3rd ballot to renew and continue Measure Q, a $24 annual parcel tax approved by 2/3 of voters in 2014 that generates $8 million of funding each year. Measure T would not increase the tax rate, and the measure would continue until ended by voters. Measure T would provide a dedicated long-term funding stream to support continued protection of open space, natural resources, wildlife habitat, and agricultural land, and supports the ongoing operations, maintenance, and stewardship of the authority's growing system of protected land. What will Measure T do? It will continue to protect open space, wildlife habitat, scenic hillsides, and farmland, and add 15,000 more acres of protected land. It will continue to protect and restore land around creeks and streams to prevent pollution, improve water quality, and help reduce the severity of flooding. It would add 30 more miles of public access trails and maintain our growing system of open space preserves. And it would create new urban open spaces and environmental education programs by continuing to fund the authority's Urban Open Space Grants Program. So what has the authority accomplished to date with Measure Q? Since 2014, the Open Space Authority's investments have resulted in almost a doubling of the number of protected lands from 16,000 acres to 28,000 acres, including working with public and private partners to protect almost 1,000 acres in North Coyote Valley and approximately 2,500 acres most recently of the Tilton Ranch. We've completed over 300 projects within the 5 cities and in the unincorporated areas, including a number of projects in incorporated Morgan Hill and in the vicinity of Morgan Hill. And many of these areas probably look familiar to you here. We've provided and maintained over 26 miles of public access trails. We've invested $3 million through urban grants in community-based projects and programs that improve the quality of life close to where people live. And we, with Measure Q, have been able to leverage very efficiently additional funding. So every dollar of Measure Q funds that we've spent, the authority has secured $3 in public and private funding for conservation, restoration, and public access projects. So why is the authority placing Measure T on this ballot? As I mentioned, since the passage of Measure Q, the authority has nearly doubled the number of acres protected on the public's behalf, and we will be required to manage these lands. Visitation is at an all-time high. So in 2019, we had 325,000 visitors coming to our open space preserves. During COVID-19, we've had 600,000 visitors. When parks and open space were deemed essential services, and the need for people to connect with parks and open space saw a significant increase. The Open Space Authority has also needed to protect and manage wildlands on the urban edge in the face of climate-enhanced fires and floods, like we saw most recently with the fires on both sides of Highway 101 and the 2017 flooding in downtown San Jose. The cost of operating and maintaining our preserves and trails, including the need to open significant new lands coming online, is consuming a larger portion of the authority's revenue. So Measure Q currently represents 2/3 of the authority's annual operating budget. The authority's commitment and responsibility under the law to the public is to protect open space and care for it in perpetuity. So Measure T would ensure that there is a dedicated funding stream to fulfill this obligation beyond the expiration of Measure Q, and to fulfill our ongoing operations and maintenance responsibilities for an expanding system of protected lands. All expenditures of Measure T, like Measure Q, must be consistent with a voter-approved expenditure plan. Measure T revenues can't be taken away by the state or repurposed for other uses. An independent financial audit of expenditures is conducted annually and reviewed by an independent expenditure oversight committee. If you'd like to learn more about Measure T and the expenditures to date of Measure Q, we have a report and more information and frequently asked questions on the Open Space Authority's website. And with that, Christina, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Okay, so with that, go ahead and raise your virtual hand if you have any questions or comments as it relates to this particular measure. I see a comment from Patrice. Wow, the increase in OSP attendees is amazing. Anything else before we move on? Okay, thank you, Andrea. And now we're going to turn it over to Caltrain. And I believe we have a couple different people. I'm not sure who's going to be presenting. I see Matthew, and I think I saw one other individual. Matthew, are you going to be presenting?
Yeah, I'll be presenting really quickly on Caltrain.
Okay, and then did you want us to pull up your presentation?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, and Angie, do you have that, or should I go ahead and pull that up?
I have it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so Matthew, if you could introduce yourself, your role, and then Angie will cue up the presentation.
Great. Thanks so much for having us, everyone. My name is Matthew Quevedo. I am one of the co-chairs of the committee to save Caltrain. As many of you know, the COVID pandemic has drastically hit many of our local transportation systems and networks throughout the Bay Area, throughout the country. Unfortunately, due to this, many of our transportation systems are in danger of shutting down. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a measure that'll save Caltrain and help it grow into the future, and that's Yes on RR. So I see my slide deck up. Thanks for putting that up. So we are the Yes on RR Rescue Caltrain Reduce Traffic campaign. We can jump to the next slide. And our campaign is focused on, of course, rescuing Caltrain. COVID, as I've mentioned, has hurt Caltrain ridership. Caltrain depends on its fare box recovery, which means its ticket sales. 70% of Caltrain's revenue is generated through those ticket sales, making it one of the more successful transportation networks or transportation systems in the country. So unfortunately, in a good way, the success of Caltrain has unfortunately led us to the situation that we're in right now. Caltrain doesn't have a permanent funding source that allows for it to be funded in perpetuity. And so we are calling on voters to help rescue Caltrain with Measure RR. Second, it's going to relieve traffic. 2 out of every 3 Caltrain riders own a car and decide to hop on the train instead of jumping in their car, joining many of us on highways 101, 280, El Camino Real, as we make our journeys to the north and south, to our jobs, to the ball game in San Francisco, to wherever it is we're going along the peninsula, down to Gilroy. Those freeways are freed up thanks to the folks who jump on Caltrain. So this is helping relieve traffic in the 3 counties in which Caltrain serves. So that's another reason I want you to keep in mind. And then reducing pollution. As we've experienced recently, the amount of pollution caused by our fires and by other means has caused us to stay indoors more than COVID has demanded. We are calling on folks to pass Measure RR to help reduce pollution caused by transportation. As I mentioned, that important statistic of 2 out of every 3 riders who ride Caltrain are choice riders, meaning they get out of their cars to jump on the train, reducing pollution, reducing congestion, and providing a better system for all of us. So if we could jump to the next slide. So I will state the facts. This is a 1/8 cent sales tax. It's on the ballot in San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara counties. We need a 2/3 to pass in the combined counties to allow for this measure to move forward. It's expected to raise approximately $108 million annually for the Caltrain system, helping improve that system, bringing faster the electrification, which is happening right now, and expected between San Jose and San Francisco by 2022, which will double the ridership from 65,000 to approximately 110,000 riders daily. If you are a rider of Caltrain, then you'll know when you jump on that train, you are not alone. It is packed. People use it. It is one of the best functioning trains in the country. And we want to ensure that train is available for more people. We want to ensure that there's more frequency. And so Measure RR will not only save and rescue Caltrain right now, but it will help expand its service well into the future, allowing more riders to hop on and encouraging riders to jump on, expanding that number of the 2 out of every 3 choice riders, where we'll have more frequency and more availability for people to get on Caltrain. A real quick fact, essentials like groceries, your rent, your healthcare are exempt from sales taxes. That is an important thing to remember. This is for sales taxes do not hit essential goods. So please keep that in mind. And then we do have a sunset. After 30 years time, we will check in with the voters. And this will, after 30 years time, it will be expired. So if folks decide at that time to continue the sales tax and continue the funding for Caltrain, great. We will have an citizens oversight independent auditing committee. I serve on the VTA Citizens Advisory Committee currently. I can tell you we do take our job seriously. We ensure that the funds are being spent on what we are calling on them, what we voted on for when we voted for these ballot measures. And we put these reports out to the public. So it's on all of us to ensure we're following up, doing our due diligence as voters to see and ensure that the funding is being spent where we want it to be. And I have no doubt that Caltrain will continue its good track record of making sure that dollars are spent where they need to be spent. And that's on improving Caltrain to help riders get on the train and out of their cars. And then finally, all funds must stay locally and dedicated to Caltrain. Sacramento can't jump in and take these funds for state purposes. The president can't jump in and take these federal funds. This is all local dollars locked up for local need here for Caltrain and for the residents of Morgan Hill and the cities that are served by Caltrain. If we could jump to the next slide. Great. So Caltrain takes cars off local highways. For those of you who unfortunately in the pre-COVID world had to jump on Highway 101 going northbound during rush hour, my hat's off to you. I'm born and raised in the south side of San Jose, where traffic is punishing and painful. Actually, my camera is pointing towards Morgan Hill right now, so I hope some of you are waving. So Measure RR's improvements would put the equivalent of 2 lanes of traffic on Caltrain instead of our highways. A good report just came out in the Streets blog by a colleague of mine at the leadership group, in which it further explains why people get on the train, how these 2 lanes get on Caltrain. So I can share that link once I'm done with the presentation. I encourage folks to do their own research. The investments that we do in the transit systems and networks of Caltrain further improve those systems and make them accessible for folks to hop on them instead of hopping in their cars, removing those individuals from our freeways, from our roadways. Can go to the next slide. There is a cost if we do not pass Measure RR. This has unfortunately been accelerated because of the COVID pandemic. Caltrain is at risk of shutting down. As I said, 70% of Caltrain's revenue comes from its fare box recovery. That's ticket sales. Because of COVID, ridership has declined to below 10%, where we have essential workers, nurses, doctors, other individuals trying to get to and from their jobs, jumping onto the train to get to and from work at the moment. CARES funding from the federal government is going to help keep Caltrain running until the end of the year. But after that, the future is very much uncertain as we scramble to find funding to save Caltrain. Measure RR will help solve that problem. With $108 million, we can ensure Caltrain is running not only now, but running and improving in the post-pandemic world as folks return to the office. For those of you who have been hearing from local media, potentially, or others, who say, you know, the future of work is us working from home, I'd like to ask you, I'd like to encourage you to ask any parent you know who has 2 or 3 kids. I myself have a 4-year-old who has taught himself how to join Zoom calls. He's in a TK at a school here in San Jose. As much as I love being with my son all day long, you know, that separation is maybe a little good for productivity and mental stability, but a large number of surveys surveying employees and employers anticipate returning to the office when the pandemic is over with, when there is a vaccine, or when it's safe to go back to work. Work is in the office, not that we're not working from home right now. But folks will return to the office and traffic will return with it. So please don't think for a second that this is how traffic will be in the future. So unfortunately, as I mentioned, Caltrain may shut down if we do not get this funding. And the estimated cost is at least 2 years. Shutting down a system like Caltrain isn't as simple as unplugging a cord or turning off a switch. There's a long process that is involved with it. And there's a lot of funding that has to go to it as well. $155 is the estimate it'll cost to restart the train once we are able to do so, whenever that would be. So Measure RR is critical now and long into the future. We could go to the next slide. I just wanted to show this slide just so you all understood who is paying attention and who is focused on making sure this race is successful. We've had Senator Dianne Feinstein, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo here in Santa Clara County. We had Mayor, City of Morgan Hill, Rich Constantine. Thank you, Mayor, for your support, who is a ballot signer on this effort, supporting this. We have Margaret Abe-Koga, Mayor of Mountain View, and also a member of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and then Ben Fields and other individuals, a number of great leaders. The next slide also shows a longer list of folks who are supporting this measure. If we could go to that next slide. But folks throughout the 3 counties, we have, I believe, over 120 elected official endorsers, a number of organizations, folks from both the left and the right. This train is essential, not only to those 65,000 daily riders and those 65,000 daily riders who will return to the train once COVID pandemic is over, but to the folks in the future who plan on riding on the train. 110,000 estimated riders once electrification is completed, or the 180,000 riders if Measure R passes and allows for the further expansion of the Caltrain system and network. So I'll close out with that. The next slide, I think, just has our website, our Facebook page, highly encourage you all to go there. We have a FAQ sheet, our list of endorsements, and a number of other great items on the website for you to check into. Really hope you folks can help support us in this effort and vote yes on Measure RR. Happy to answer any questions if there are. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so it looks like we have one live caller right now. We have Swanee. Angie, we can go ahead and unmute Swanee.
You should be unmuted now, Swanee.
Okay, Swanee, it looks like you're good. Okay, let's just leave Swanee unmuted so that when she is able, she can jump in with her question. So looking at our Q&A, we have a couple questions from Patrice. And so one is for Measure RR, where and when does the Citizens Oversight Committee meet? And so RR is for Caltrain. And so when does the Citizens Oversight Committee meet? Is that something that you're able to answer, Matthew? If not, perhaps we can get Patrice a link. Maybe there's something on Caltrain's website regarding that.
Yeah, I think that's in the document that the Joint Powers Board, the resolution that they passed. If it's, I'll just say based off of other oversight committees that exist, they typically form the year after it's voted in, of course. And then there's a call for volunteers to sit on that board. So I will find the link that directs folks to the right place for that. As I mentioned, I'm on the VTA Citizens Advisory Committee, which also is the watchdog committee for a measure we passed back in 2000. So I am a volunteer who sits on that board, and I helped, select the auditor who audits the measure and then decides if the dollars have been spent correctly, and also we are part of the board that releases the report to the public through newspapers and other means. So let me find the direct answer for that question, and I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Matthew, appreciate it. And then Patrice's other question is about Measure T. How many times a year is the brush cleared at OSP? Is it done by employees, volunteers, etc.? And would the brush clearing increase if Measure T is passed? And, oh, good. Thank you, Andrea.
Well, thanks, Christina. Thanks, Patrice, for your question. I just think I sent you a written response, but I'll be happy to respond here. Our wildland areas in Santa Clara County, very similar to other communities throughout California, are lands in their natural state. And the best way that we can reduce the threat of wildfire is to try and reduce or prevent development in the wildland urban interface, because that takes important firefighting resources away if they have to be protecting homes in what they call the WUI, the wildland urban interface. But for our 28,000 acres in Santa Clara County, our staff are trained in both firefighting and vegetation management. So we are removing non-native vegetation, flammable vegetation with hand tools mostly, with our volunteers and stewardship crews. We're also widely using grazing across our properties, which reduces grasslands and flammable vegetation. It also supports the agricultural community that we want to do in Santa Clara County. So it does double duty, both reducing wildfires and supporting the ag community. So we don't have a schedule that we take out weeds. We manage our lands for both habitat and to reduce wildland fires.
Thank you, Andrea.
Sure.
Looks like we have a question here from, so Swanee said, I'm sorry that I cannot be heard. I have my microphone on and unmuted. I really wanted to speak in support of RR. Thank you, Swanee. Let us know if you're able to get on and jump in. And then we have from Mayor Pro Tem, hi Matt, as an urban planner who has lived in New York City and San Francisco, I'm a fan of public transit and all you do. Many of our residents rely on it or would like to. Can you talk a bit about how Morgan Hill may directly benefit, please? As you know, we've had a train cut from service here. We've been talking about improving and electrifying to get more trains. Will this allow this benefit to be realized? Thank you.
Yes, good question. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for it. So a major part of Measure RR is to expand service. In South County, I believe the number is from increasing service, peak hour service from 5 trains per hour per direction to 8 trains per hour per direction. And expansion of the Gilroy service to a minimum of 5 morning and 5 afternoon trains. So we are going to see that electrification and the expansion of more frequent trains to Morgan Hill and Gilroy, providing that frequent network that we need to encourage riders to hop on the train. That is, a major cornerstone of Measure RR is providing further coverage to South County, especially, of course, Morgan Hill and Gilroy. But yes, Measure RR will help expand that service to be able to accommodate folks in Morgan Hill.
Thank you. In the Q&A we have from Anonymous. I am generally in favor of allocating money for all 3 measures. However, I have concerns about how they were drafted. Both Measure S and T would require voters to remove the property tax on a future ballot, and that will likely never happen. Measure RR increases the sales tax for 30 years, and given the fact that more people are working remotely and technology will continue to make it easier for people to work remotely, I am hesitant to approve a sales tax for 30 years. If any of the measures fail, I encourage you to put them back on a future ballot with different terms. Measure S and T would have a definite end date, 15 or 30 years, and Measure RR would be easier to support if it was for a 15-year term. So, just stating thoughts and opinion there. Do any of the different partners want to mention anything in response to that?
I'd be happy to start actually for Measure S. So, and thanks for the question, actually. It's a common question that we get often on this. So long story short, well, first and foremost, the way we structured Measure S, we modeled it after what was done down in LA County. It's a measure that was very similar to ours. It's a stormwater measure, actually, and some water supply. It's called Measure W. And they also, it's an until repealed by voters structured measure, which is what ours is as well. And they put what we call side rails on it so that you have a way of basically repealing it, rescinding it, or somehow modify or reducing it, basically. So it's the 3 R's at every 15-year stage in the process. So we understand that, programs change over time. Obviously, that's why we're changing ours right now. And we wanted to make sure that the voters in the community has a chance to provide that input at least every 15 years. And in addition to that, we also have 5-year checkpoints on the program as we go, so that when we get to that 15-year, sort of ultimate checkpoint, at each milestone, the board can decide, do we need to reduce this? Do we need to repeal it completely? Do we need to rescind it? So it's modeled after a very successful measure already used down in LA County. That was very important to our board, of course, before they put it onto the ballot, and because we thought it would be important to the voters as well. In addition to that, I want to note that there is a social justice element here, and that is that having to go out and ask for money every 15 years really over time has resulted in structural racism. And I'll explain that. So we've got a lot of folks up in the northern part of our county who have gotten a lot of flood protection projects built up there. They enjoy flood protection. Like I mentioned, the residents of Morgan Hill have been waiting 50 years to get. So, that's just Morgan Hill too. We've got a lot of underprivileged and underrepresented areas in parts of San Jose, especially along Coyote Creek, that have been waiting decades as well for the same flood protection they already enjoy. So if it's really just, inherently unfair to make these underprivileged and underrepresented communities have to go back to the ballot box every 15 years to beg for the same funding for the same projects that provide the same protections already enjoyed by those who are wealthier in the community. So I'll look to Director Varela and see if he has any additional thoughts he wants to add on that.
Rachel, as usual, you'll cover it quite well. But to the point of sunsetting this, as Rachel indicated, and one other thing that we're looking at doing is also creating an oversight committee that to work with the public in reference to this, so that one thing that you must keep in mind, this is about flood protection. Now, most recently, 2017, we experienced one of the worst floods in history in our region. Fortunately, in South County, nobody was impacted, but it could happen. Now, with the August Creek Flood Protection Project that's currently underway, as Rachel indicated, that project was on the books for 50 years. And why? Because the Army Corps of Engineers and others could not find a benefit, an economic benefit, as those communities in North County that also were not getting their projects built because they did not fall under the economic benefit to the Army Corps of Engineers. With this Measure S, we will be able to fund those projects and into perpetuity, hopefully, to have the monies there and have this oversight committee in the future with you, the public, to say, okay, it's time to cut this, we don't need it. But remember, this is about your protection, our protection. So I encourage you to support Measure S.
And Christina, I just wanted to add one more thing. And thank you, Ray, for saying you're speaking too fast, slow down. I will absolutely mind that. I just to really punctuate what Director Varela was saying, you know, problems like drought, climate change, and aging pipelines aren't going away. These are permanent challenges that our community has to confront. So without that long-term guaranteed funding, we'll just be locked into short-term, inefficient, and inadequate solutions. So if we really care to address these problems, we have to pass Measure S.
If I could jump in, Christina, I'd like to answer that question too. And I think what Rachel Gibson just said from Valley Water is exactly apropos to Measure T as well. These types of measures now do allow the public in the future to repeal or rescind the measure, but there is momentum in having a measure continue on, and albeit fairly modest amounts that are in, especially for Measure T. We're talking about $2 per month, $24 a year per parcel. The Open Space Authority is probably the smallest agency in terms of public open space funding in the San Francisco Bay Area. It has a $12 million annual budget. 8 million of it, or 2/3, comes from Measure Q and would come from Measure T. So if we go back to the voters every 5 or 10 years, not only can we not respond to the challenges that are coming at us now, and we've heard Governor Newsom say climate change is here now, we've got to be able to stand up and address these problems on an ongoing basis. And if we have to go back to the voters every few years to ask for additional funds, we lose the ability to commit to our partners to do our local part. When you go and you ask a federal or state government or private foundations to match your money, they want to know that you have a dedicated local funding stream to be a reliable partner. They will say no to you if you can't stand up and make that pledge. The other thing is that we work very closely with Santa Clara County Parks, Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, Valley Water, and other important regional partners. We are not working in silos. We are working together in a holistic landscape across Sonoma County. So we depend upon each other to bring what we can to the table and use our money efficiently and effectively. So that's why a continuous funding stream is so important. And as we watched the fires burn over 4 million acres in the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Diablo Range, here we were in Silicon Valley watching those wildfires burn. It was a wake-up call that we've got to respond to have healthy wildlands around Silicon Valley as we move forward. It showed us that open spaces are our protective buffer for our urban areas. When the Loma fire, and we thought that was big in 2016, hit the Santa Cruz Mountains and came down into Rancho Cañada del Oro, CAL FIRE made a stand in Rancho Cañada del Oro. If that fire had not been put out there, it would have come right down into Morgan Hill. So it's really important to be able to address these issues now and have the confidence and the dedicated funding to do this. And I'm very proud that we leverage $3 for every dollar that we spend in local funding. And the last thing I'll say is, because this is not a tax increase, we will have to do more with less increasingly as we go on. So in other words, it's self-regulating to have this $24 that doesn't change over time. We'll have to look harder and more effectively for more funding in other places, from the state, from the feds, and from foundations. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit why it's not an effective strategy in the times we're living in now to have to go back to the voters every 5 or 10 years. And don't forget, all these measures you're hearing about have very strict oversight built into them. They have independent oversight committees who can make findings and make recommendations that could be used by the public to make changes later on if they so fit. But maybe I'll stop there. Thanks, Christina.
And happy to just further finalize the point. The oversight committee, something is, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's on all of us. It's on the voters. It's on the residents for us to follow and track these measures, the measures that we would pass this November, the measures we passed back in 2018, or any measure that we ever pass. The oversight committees do a tremendous job tracking these dollars, regardless of the agency. I know many of the agencies here, the counties, the VTA, and other boards, it's on us to read those reports, study them, and follow up with our elected leaders and our representatives to ensure those dollars are being spent on what we were told they were being, going to be spent on. So I encourage folks to follow up with those oversight committees that our measures are forming and crafting, to allow voters the insight, the accessibility to see what is happening with the money we were told would be and how it would be spent. So encourage folks to do that. Encourage folks to hold us all accountable. I know you're taking a risk at the ballot when you vote for a measure, but I want you to take us, hold us accountable and make sure these measures are moving forward in the way that you wanted it to move forward, as we will be too. Our organizations, John Varela, elected official over, as he's been tracking these, and the many individuals who are championing these causes. So keep us to our word and make sure you're following up to make sure you're doing your part as a voter. So.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so Swanee, do we want to go ahead and try again? And I believe you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey! Well, I just wanted to say, as a 31-year resident of Morgan Hill, that transportation, the flood control projects, saving Coyote Valley were the three things I got involved with as soon as I moved here. But to speak on RR, all of these measures are going to help us deal with climate change. In that way, they are related. However, Caltrain to South County is vitally important. It's almost a matter of quality of life, in that we can't depend on more cars on the 101 to get us anywhere, because it's stopped most days. Anyone who's traveled it. The second thing is that Caltrain now is the only way that we can get to North County, Silicon Valley, and our jobs. Our air quality has suffered because of all these cars on the road. And finally, Caltrain has to be funded so that we can get it electrified like they're doing on the peninsula. Again, climate change fighting by getting rid of the diesel trains. Once we electrify our Caltrain system here, we have it run on weekends so we can go to 49er games and theaters or whatever. It's so vitally important. It's really a matter of our quality of life down here to get that done. And once it's electrified, we won't need no stinking California High-Speed Rail Authority. We'll have our system that we can depend on, that we take care of locally. And it will be a huge boon to the growth in South County economically as well. I am done. Thank you, everybody, that presented. Great job. Good night.
Thank you, Swanee. I'm glad we were able to get your comments in. Any further questions or comments from any of our partner agencies? I see in the chat, we have a couple links that have been posted that if individuals want to find out more information, that they can go and find out that information. I'll just wait one more moment. If you want to raise your virtual hand, you can do that, or *9. And I think that, thank you, Matthew, for posting that information. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us, our attendees. And I want to thank also each of the different agencies for joining us. I'm hearing a little feedback. Is somebody trying to jump in with something? No. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. Like I said, this has been recorded. We'll go ahead and post this. Maureen Tobin will put it in our 411 that goes out tomorrow, our weekly newsletter. And thank you so much, and have a great rest of the evening. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.